Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this hour on how the mentor can help a mentee to create a CV that will stand out. Here in the room we have John, Matt, and myself, Eka, and we have 4 mentors who have joined us already. There were a few more people who are interested and wanted to attend, but I think we'll just start and hopefully they will be able to join us later. So note about webinars and how they work. So you will be able to hear us and to see the PowerPoint slides. Won't be able to hear you. So if you have any questions, any comments you'd like to communicate with us, please use the chat function. And it'd be great if you could address your questions or comments to all panelists, so we'll allow us all to see them. So the main reason why we chose this topic and why we thought it would be important to run a webinar on helping mentees with their CVs is that when we speak to young people about mentoring and we explain to them what a mentor can help them with them a few examples, the majority of them mentioned that they need help with their CV. So some of them need help because they might never had a CV. And for it's quite different. They have quite a good CV, but might still need help with tailoring their CV to a particular vacancy they want to apply for. But or not helping a mentee with their CV is an important part of a mentor. So that's where the idea for this webinar came from. So I'll hand you over to John now, who will tell you a bit more about, well, first of all about himself, but also about the content for today.
And Matt, welcome to everyone to the webinar. I'm absolutely delighted to have been put this webinar together to support fellow mentors getting a better insight of what works in a CV and conversely what would work well in a CV. To start by telling you a little bit about myself for those of you that don't know me. I've been sort of a mentor with Scotland for just over 2 years. And before that, I worked in the banking sector with a variety of jobs, but also had responsibility as a hiring manager with banking organisations. During the sort of recession, I was and I retrained, went back to university and trained to become a careers advisor. As I qualified, I moved into the public sector, working for the National Skills Organisation, which at the time was called Careers Scotland. Some of you may know that with children that you have at secondary school at the moment, but it's now known as Skills Development Scotland. I've worked mainly in schools and colleges, but I also specialised in delivering redundancy support services to companies across Central Belt whilst I was working for SDS. Years ago, I decided to make the jump back into the private sector, and now I'm registered coach, my own career coaching company based in Edinburgh. Since then, starting up my company, all people from all of life with CV and job searching skills and career development goals. And basically, what I'm pretty decent at, showing how people can keep control of their own CV, get their job search and get them where they want to be. The content of the webinar today is basically looking at what makes a good CV. Basically, the mentee having ownership of a CV is, for me, is very important, and I think for Cassia and Matt, they realise, that with the mentees that they've been working with, it's important to, enable people to get to grips with making their own CV. A CV around a particular vacancy, as Cassia mentioned earlier, about tailoring it to the job description or job specification, will make the CV stand out from the rest of the crowd and help them move up that possibility of getting selected for interview. many different types of CV formats, but I think for the purposes of this webinar, we'll focus on three, looking at chronological, skills-based and generic CVs. I think it sort of mentioned that, focusing main elements of the CV are really important. Talk later a little bit about person profile, key skills and achievements, mentee's work history, the recent and training, additional information which would help with their application, and all referees. Things that you must do in a CV and the things that you leave out. I've basically made it quite straightforward, as you'll see as the webinar goes forward. So it's going to be some things that we should have and some things that we shouldn't. I include a few websites and a couple of books that I use in sort of general coaching and developing clients that I'm working with. So sort of what makes a good CV. I always thought that something that makes a CV, a good CV stand out from one that's not so good is to use keywords from the skills and from the job descriptor. I believe that this definitely would improve, mentees' chances of getting to the shortlist for interview pile. A known fact within the sort of HR realm is a hiring manager will spend about 15 seconds looking over a CV. So you need to make sure that their CV is short, definitely more than 2 pages long, and punchy. Profile for me should really be placed at the beginning of a CV. Profile is a very concise statement that highlights mentee's key attributes or reason deciding to work in that particular area. As well, they pick out a few relevant achievements and skills while simply articulating their career aims as well. It must focus on the sector that they're applying for. A letter will be job specific. Personal profile must be specific as well. For me is a perfect lens and can stretch that, but definitely to no more than 150 words.
I think an interesting point about personal profiles is that people tend to think they're getting less and less popular. Do you think that as well, John?
The personal profile is the first thing that the hiring manager will see, and if you have rather than copied and pasted it onto each job that you're applying for and each CV you're making up, I always find that if you tailor that personal profile, it really, really well, because it basically hooks the interest of the person that's looking at your CV. And remember, you've got a short amount of time trying to hook the interest of the hiring manager. And I'm talking about things that were familiar to them in terms of things like pages that you've used or some project that you've worked on, or mention relevant experience that they're looking for. They move up list of being much more likely to in that list of people that they want to call for interview. Yeah.
The thing I always find quite tricky about personal profiles is there anything you'd recommend of making sure you don't kind of repeat the same stuff as your personal statement, or is that not really an issue?
I would definitely agree with that. Try not to go over the same ground in other parts of the CV. Your personal profile is a unique statement, and a lot of mistakes that people that I've worked with over the years as a career coach is that they really just copy and paste their personal profile from a job and just put it in and think that's it, that's going to be enough to get me to interview. That for me, even as a hiring manager when I was working in the banking sector, was real frustration because people, it just looked to me people weren't taking the time to tailor that particular part of their CV to the job. So I would say that if you take the time to do that, rather than doing the personal profile at the beginning of your CV,
Yep.
I would always leave it to the end of the CV. So, you know, when you're sort of like, you know, writing say like, for example, an introduction to an essay, and what you do is that you would have your structure, etc., you know, to begin with, so you would have the framework, and you would build upon that. And you wouldn't really sort of, you know, start talking about the introduction. You would leave that right until the end, until everything that you need, and then tailor it that way. And
Conclusion.
It's more of a conclusion, yeah, and it's a lot more concise, and it's easier to sort of, you know, fit in. So for me, what makes a good CV is, you know, being able to sort of, you know, slot the bits that you have already from your working life and your education and training, and just sort of whatever experience you've got, just, you know, clicking all into the jigsaw and making them slot in at the right bit. So I would always say, you know, that if people are struggling with, you know, with a personal profile, leave it at the end. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. And the good thing about that is that if you leave your personal profile to the end, it's the last thing that you need to do, and that you need to tailor it. It's getting you into a routine, and, you know, of sure that you're talking about the job, and that you're using hooks that hiring managers are looking for. So if you leave it till the end, that's fine. But if not, you know, it's up to people, you know, how they want to work it. For me, that's the best way that I would advise people. Sort of another thing that I put down is having an easily readable font. Whatever you always sort of, you know, say to people, something like Times New Roman, Arial 10 or 11 point is absolutely perfect. It's nice and clear and really easy to read. Nothing English like Lucinda handwriting or a Gordian script. Another thing as well, I would also be very careful about email addresses that you use. Over the years, I've seen use of many inappropriate email addresses. I'll speak about this shortly, but, you know, for basically using your name and something like @gmail.com is sufficient, or another sort of, you know, email provider is absolutely fine. I like to see things, you know, that sort of, you know, enhance your skills and qualities. So if you've got something like a full clean driving license, mention that. If you've got a PVG status, we're working with vulnerable groups, you can mention that. You can put in your reference number. One thing that a lot of mentees that I've worked with from all across the world since I started with work volunteering for Project Scotland, and a lot of them don't even put in, you know, the fact that, you know, that they're native speakers of another language. These are key things, you know, that you shouldn't be leaving out in your CV. Definitely include them. And in terms of, you know, the volunteering side of things, you know, if you mismention it, if you've got a certificate, you know, or a commendation, put this in. Also, don't be afraid to flaunt any achievements that you've got. All sell yourself, because this is your opportunity to make your mark. And believe me, if you do these things right, it will get you further up the list and a lot more likely to be for an interview. In looking at freeze, I would always suggest, you know, like one of two should be your most recent employer, or your last employer prior to that. I know that some mentees may struggle to think of someone, you know, who they could use. So for mentees, I've always said manager at their placement, and, you know, for a second referee, it could be either work related or university or college lecturer. But mostly, it's always really important that when you're using somebody as a reference, ask their permission. So, and looking at the critical versus skills-based CV.
Are you having a little bit of issues with the slides, or should we get now?
That's where good. Right. Okay. Moving on to sort of, you know, the chronological versus skills-based CV. I would say that, when clients that I'm working with, that using a chronological CV, this is based when you want to match your qualifications with the job role that you're applying for. And made by putting your most recent work experience and qualifications first. I'm going to suggest using this template to mentees because it allows them to provide clear details of their qualifications, work history, and any responsibilities that they've had. It's quite easy for them to match that against the criteria that is given in the job descriptor.
One thing probably about the chronological CV is that it still needs to be selective. Because I think I spoke to one of our mentors the other day who said that he's made a very good CV and it was 2 pages. So when they talked about the placement and what she could add in terms of duties and responsibilities, she had the placement. She added that to her CV and then emailed him at the end. And it turned out that she took the font size to something like 7 or 8, which was hardly readable. But because it was a chronological CV, she thought that it needs to be everything, everything she's ever done. So I think that's interesting to discuss with a mentee as well.
No, absolutely, yes. I have seen CVs. The biggest CV that I've had over the years is probably about 10 pages long, and it's basically included their most recent job up until the job that they had when they left school. So yes, it's about, as you say, Cassia, about being selective in the chronological based CV. You don't have to put absolutely everything in. And if you've got sort of, for example, if you're sort of starting off in your working life, you have quite a few sort of temporary positions or jobs where there's similar based roles. It's okay to sort of roll that into just just like a generic thing. You just put down like the job descriptor and put various employers, and just put in like like a time period, because that saves them having to put in like sort of 5 or 6 different employers. They just put in like one line, which covers a whole gamut of employers. The that we're sort of moving on to is the skills-based CV. I use this if my mentee has gaps in their employee. I also use it when people have sort of limited work experience, are looking for a job which is unrelated to their degree or qualifications. Ability skills are transferable to different roles and to different employers. And about the skills-based CV, it allows your mentee to focus on the skills that they've developed in various areas of their work life.
Yeah, and the skills-based CV, it might even be worth encouraging a mentee to create one, even though they may not do that. So if they have a chronological one and they have a chronological one is what they need to apply for jobs, still do a skills-based one, because that will give time to think about their skills in more depth and have an understanding of what their transferable skills are, what the examples are. So all these will be then useful when they go to an interview.
Absolutely, and I think the thing about using the skills-based CV is that it's quite dominant in your CV, so it's very visible to the hiring manager, and I'd like to see sort of like gaps, and if they were to see any gaps in sort of like your employment history, certainly for this with some people that I've worked with in schools and colleges who sort of struggled with personal issues, for example, something like poor mental health, or issues in the in the family home. If they've got gaps, and they need to put that down, it's absolutely fine. But it's about sort of sizing those, but using the time where you've got gaps and talking about other things that you did, perhaps, whether it be home-based or sort of, supported or cared for somebody. So, it's really important that, you're using skills like, organisation skills, building, taking control situations. You might be managing money for someone, so these are really important things to sort of, put down where you do have gaps. And everybody's, skills-based CV is going to be very different. So, for example, your CV, Cassia, your skills-based one will be very different from Matt's as it would be from mine, because we come from different walks of life. And that's a great thing about a skills-based CV. It allows you to sort of, talk about things that you've done in your personal life as well as your working life, and then in the skills-based CV. Sort of jumping ahead of the game. Now I'm going to sort of focus on the generic versus a tailored CV. Generic CVs are sometimes known as job board CVs. I tend to suggest using this generic CV template when you're applying for things that you see sort of like S1 jobs, Read.com, any sort of recruitment agencies, or even like sort of any job centre sort of like websites. If you it really allows you to give you a brief overview on your career history and your areas of expertise, but talk about it in a very general way. So talk your financial skills experience. You could be talking about your education experience. You could also be talking about any sort of packages that you've used. So, for example, if you're talking about financial packages that you've used, jobs that you've done, something like Sage Line 50 or Sage Sovereign, or SAP sort of packages, then that's the sort of stuff that I would be putting down on a generic CV. You need to make sure though that it includes the right keywords, and I would also add the caveat that it's really important to leave out any personal identifiers such as an address or a telephone number. Now, saying that is that I recently had a mentee that I mentioned to Cassia about. She sort of put some personal identifying information on a job board, and they tried to scam mentee. Thankfully, she had the sense to get in touch with me, and I had the wherewithal to sort of just guide in the right way, and not part with her with her money. That's what online job boards will do. You have some jobs that are real, but you'll also have people in there that are looking to scam you and get your personal information, because there's a value out there. Tailored CV, I always say that this is the best type of CV to use to make every job that you apply for. Your mentee needs to know that there are no shortcuts here, and that if someone takes the time to tailor their CV to the job that they're applying for, they are much more likely to make it onto an interview shortlist. I say that there are really no guarantees that the job, but by taking the time to focus on skills and relevant work experience that are needed to do the job that you're applying for, I think that if you hike that, you much higher up on the HR hiring managers shortlist. I'm going to 10 things that mentees need to include in their CV, and for the purposes of this, I'm going to be focusing on the tailored skills-based CV.
Can I just end with one question about tailored CVs? I think one of the things that a lot of people find difficult is knowing how much detail is going to. So they need to kind of tailor it to the specific job application, but at least in my experience, it can be quite tricky to know to link everything and how much detail you can put in per role.
Yeah, I would always I would always err on the side of breadth. I always think that you don't need to put down absolutely everything that you've done in particular jobs. A couple of sentences is more than enough. Just a couple of bullet points is more than sufficient. But maybe what you should be doing is that you should be focusing on different aspects of the job descriptor that you're looking at for the job that you're applying, and you know, put that into your CV, because then it allows you to get more hits using all those keywords that the hiring and manager is looking for you to mention, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for these keywords in the CVs, and if you don't see them,
they're going to be kind of distributed across the CV.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're not trying to tick them all every role. You're just trying to get a key per role.
Yeah.
Experience.
Yeah. You want some sort of like CVs, and we don't sort of have the time to sort of go into it here, but there is something called like a competency-based skills interview, competency-based skills CV, where you have to touch on absolutely everything. They're more sort of like required in line for sort of more sort of like technical-based roles in sort of like IT or something like in or education. These sort of things are sort of frequently used, and we're not going to sort of touch on that. Although I give people the opportunity to use sort of website links, which we, at the end of the presentation, will sort of click and they can have a look and see the different types of CVs that are there. I think it's worth mentioning about international differences in CVs in relation to things that are included. Of the mentees that I've worked with, lots of them come from different parts of the world. Some of the CVs that I've seen have included photos of themselves, dates of birth, marital status and national identity numbers. I would say these are not appropriate. They're not needed at all. Any identifiers will sort of stand against your mentee during the selection process. And the most obvious identifier is like your date of birth. For example, if you're putting something like that in there, although hiring managers shouldn't be discriminating against you, if they can see that you're of a particular age, then they may put your CV to one side and not shortlist you for an interview. They're not supposed to do that. However, it happens. Yeah. I would also caveat as well that your address and your number and email address, you need to make it easier for employers to get in touch with you. In terms of if you're doing generic-based sort of like a CV for a jobs board, no home address or any other sort of personal identifying information. And most definitely don't use email addresses that look unprofessional. Over the years, I've seen personal emails that are absolutely fine for families and friends, but also caveat that use one for job searching as well, something that's very professional. Definitely nothing with date of birth, no sort of football or political allegiances or any slang. Nothing like that. It turns employers off. They don't like to see anything like that. Highlighting your tasks and responsibilities, show your skills and strengths, things that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. So what you said earlier, Matt, about talk about the job descriptor and maybe sort of mashing it up and just mentioning particular skills or achievements that you've sort of got. You can do that in the job history that you've got. That's really useful. And a lot of people, skills and knowledge that they've developed in any job that they've had. But a lot of people forget about out of work sort of skills that they have, and tend not to sort of highlight that. And always ask people to sort of be aware of that. If you've got somebody that's sort of a mentee that's just starting out in their working life, they probably won't have a lot of work experience. So I think it's really important to think about other things that they've been involved with, either at college or university, or school even, talking about things that they've been involved with. So sort of, the thing would be volunteering, any sort of, extracurricular stuff. If you've, been involved in sport, if you're at a particular level, if you achieved any awards, or, if you represented your country, absolutely about it, because this is what people, hiring managers are looking for. I would also say to people, always be your CV about qualifications and experience, because lying in your CV will get caught out at the interview stage. And if you're in a job and if you get that job offered to you and that job and does the checks and actually finds that you've either inflated your degree or any qualifications that you've said you've got that you haven't, then you will likely be dismissed, and possibly you could be prosecuted as well. So you're very, very careful about that.
So in terms of things that might feel kind of tempted to kind of fudge, would you recommend leaving out, say, if someone has got a really bad result in their degree, or if they've been out from a job? What's the kind of best approach to deal with those things?
That I would use that employer, because if it would give a gap if you sort of didn't mention that employer.
Yeah.
I would say it's okay to put that employer in, but for God's sake, don't use them as a reference, because that would just fall back really badly on you. I always err on the side of caution. I know that some people can sometimes be a bit talk about sort of like a white lie, or maybe sort of inflate something that they've done. I would always err on the side of caution and just be really upfront and honest, and don't about anything. When if you get shortlisted and you get to interview, you will out, because people will hiring managers such as myself will look at these things and sort of pick those out, and you sort of think to yourself, oh, I didn't really think I was going to get called for an interview. Yeah. And that's the first thing that I would focus on, specifically that and if you get caught out, it reflects very well on you, and it does get around, with if you're applying for other jobs within that same organisation, then the hiring manager is likely to know the person that's providing. So you need to be very careful about you say, so be very, very careful about what you put in the CV. Definitely be honest and upfront about things. And if you've got like a gap, if perhaps you've been sort of just laid off from a job, you can justify that through, for example, sort of like poor health, or you had keen responsibilities, or it was just something that a job didn't work out and it wasn't for you. Then talk about that at interview. It's absolutely fine to put it down, but sort of say, oh well, you weren't really very within that company. Can you tell me a little bit why? What happened there? So it's okay to be honest about it. Because employers understand that sometimes when they're hiring people, that the expectation of their employee and the employee's expectation of the job sometimes get different. From it's not until you're actually in and doing it for a few months that you actually get to know the ins and outs of the job. So I would.
Maybe one quick thing before we move on, actually linking to education and qualification. One of the questions that came up with the patient I had with one of our mentors recently, vacancies, there are some job descriptions that require particular qualifications, and can be particularly difficult for mentees from abroad, because obviously the education system can be very, very different. Mm-hmm. So what would be the best way to approach it?
I'd always say that the best way to approach that is there's an organisation out there called NARIC, N-A-R-I-C. If you just sort of Google it, you can sort of, it will bring up the details. Mm-hmm. There is a cost involved to sort of doing that, and basically what this organisation will do is it will take your qualifications in a foreign language and basically, match it up to the UK equivalent or Scottish equivalent, whatever it may be, depending on, where you're applying for a job. It's a cost that needs to be sort of like paid up front. So I always sort of, suggest to people that they have an idea of what the equivalent is to that, then I basically put down, like what it is in their native language, and just bracket it by putting equivalent to blah blah blah, whatever it may be. So that's a way of getting around it, without actually having to pay the money. But some organisations will, will look for a paper from NARIC, which basically, puts your degree qualifications brought in your native language into English, so that employers can see, what subjects you studied, so that they can measure you up against other applicants. So there's a cost, to that. So I would sort of, say that if they know what equivalent to do that, rather than sort of, putting that cost onto mentees, because, they're in voluntary positions, they're probably going to be, full of sort of, money at the moment. So, if to keep costs down would be fine. There are some organisations out there that would, meet cost of your NARIC sort of, equivalency sort of, fee, but they're few and far between, and they're very particular in the organisations that will do that. I also sort of mentioned as well that to space on your CV, you have to include references. Personally, I do like to see references on the CV. But if you do, make sure that you state that they're available on request. I will suggest wording like excellent references available on request, because that basically just shows your hiring manager that you are able to provide them if need be. And as I said earlier, always ask your referees if it's okay to include them. So that they're going to expect somebody from that organisation to be in touch. And so it's even quite good to just sort of say, look, apply for X, Y, Z job, with X, Y, and Z organisation. Tell a little bit about it, and apply for it, and so that they know what to expect. Most hiring managers will probably prefer to get like an email address. So some sort of like phone, but I've tended to sort of do references for people that I know via email, and that tends to be the way of things. If you avoid fancy fonts, borders, tables, and graphics, these can be very distracting. But I say that there are exceptions to this rule, and style CV shows off your skills. For example, as a graphic designer, certainly go for it, and push the boat out. There is absolutely nothing wrong with using something like that. And I think it's really important as well that you're using writing your CV, use active language, say I completed rather than the task was completed. Be positive and avoid cliches. Keep sentences short. So it's what you were saying earlier, Matt, about the sort of a couple of bullet points. Just punchy, nothing passive. Use active verbs where possible. And try and keep your CV to suit two sides of A4. There are some exceptions, but we don't need to look at that at the moment. And most will scan your CV now, and it basically makes them easy to sort of spot keywords by using bullet points and headings. So that will sort of bring your CV up the pile, as it were, to heading towards that potential shortlisting. Mistakes at all costs. You will check on your computer. I'm the world's worst speller, so I always use sort of a check. Don't rely on the spell check to find it. If you're really not confident about that, there's somebody just to cast a quick eye over it, because it doesn't take them long to do that.
That's a great place that a mentor can come in to just do that check and see if there's anything that could be improved.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I think it's it will be often mentors who will be asked to do that. And I suppose one example that comes to my mind now is one of my mentees actually said to me, "Oh, I'll email you my CV, and if you see any mistakes or if you think of a better way of describing my experience, just change it." So yeah, I suppose it's worth thinking about keeping the balance right, because obviously you want to help your mentee, particularly if they struggle with grammar or with spelling. But at the same time, your help is not about rewriting their CV. It needs to be their CV. It needs to reflect their not only their experience but also their personality to some extent.
I would agree with that, Cassie, and wholeheartedly endorse it, because I think it's really important that we, as mentors, don't take this on board and sort of because then you've got that expectation that when you're sitting down with your mentee, if you say that you're going to do it, then you have to follow through and do it. It's something that they're going to expect of you. And for me, that's the whole point of this CV webinar. It's about shifting that level of control and possession back onto the mentee and saying, this is your CV. It's a living thing, something that you will take with you as you move through your career. So if you want to make some changes, then please go ahead. I've got no qualms in reading somebody's CV. That's absolutely fine, but I most certainly would not do a massive rewrite for them, because to me that's doing a massive disservice to them.
Yeah. I think I have a question from Kay. She's basically asking if mentors should ever offer to be a referee for a mentee who has no experience other than their volunteer placement.
I would say that in my experience, I have only once referee for one of my mentees, but more likely than not, I would probably push that to apologies, Cassie and Matt, because obviously the guys a lot better than we do. So I would probably push it back onto Project Scotland and ask them if Cassie and Matt could act as a referee. If they're unable to do that, then by all means. But
well, the line manager knows the volunteer best. Probably.
Absolutely, and as I said earlier, I did sort of say that when you're using referees, if you're sort of struggling, then use their most recent sort of voluntary work experience placement. Use the line manager, because they know them. They know if they can turn up in time. They know what their capabilities are. They know how they come across with people and how they work within the organisation. So I would definitely use a line manager as a mentee. I'm sorry.
I think it's also because most employers ask for 2 references.
Yes.
So obviously, a manager can be one, but if there's no that if the mentee has not had any previous experience, then I suppose a mentor could be a referee.
Yes, absolutely.
We've had that before as well. Like there were some volunteers wasn't the placement with us was actually the first thing they did since they left school, and sometimes there was a huge gap between they left school and they started volunteering for us. So if there's for one more person, then probably their mentor would be still be in a best position too.
And that's what I would sort of get them to fall back on, either like the line manager, or maybe like a lecturer at uni, or like a coach, or even like for the younger people that we're mentoring, maybe even like a favourite school teacher or something like that. So it's about sort of using them wisely. In terms of the career coaching side of things, I've sort of put a couple of useful websites that I sort of use. The first one, the Skills Development Scotland My World of Work website. I've sort of included this because it's this facility where you can sort of register and log in, allows you to sort of build the framework of a CV. It's really useful to very easy to sort of like set up. we've basically got SDS as a careers office in Shamrock Place. They've got the office area. This can be used for job searching and printing off CV covering letters. Although I would say that when I sort of worked there, I always sort of made my sort of client aware that it was limited on the public access PCs. Sort of based in parts of Scotland. I also have an office in George Square, and we also have partner agencies as well. So you can go into the Department for Work and Pensions, and you can sort of print off any CVs or cover letters that you need from there. I'd like to sort of to those of you that have got graduate mentees. I always direct them to the Prospects website. It's a great source of information, very current information in job searching, and it's got very particular examples of specific types of CVs. It's not only got your chronological skills bases that I've talked about in this webinar, but they also have teaching, technical, academic, and legal CVs. So that's that second sort of link will take you to that. I was sort of talking earlier, just before the webinar started, about the native sort of mentees that I've sort of worked with. Any that's sort of involved in media, can I suggest that they consider making a video CV? This is used as an accompaniment to their paper-based CV, but it gives them the opportunity to shine and show their talents and the hiring managers.
We were saying as well that if again, if it's a creative mentee, or if they want to get into, say they want to get into journalism and they have a blog, then you make sure they link to that, maybe in the additional skills section, so they can let that be hidden away if it's all good experience. Again, with the caveat again that not if it's too political or,
yes,
or too opinionated.
Yes, yes. No sweary blogs, please.
No sweary blogs.
I'd also say to those of you that sort of prefer the sort of look at books, you can jump onto to Amazon, and there are a couple of great sort of books that I would recommend. Christian Hooley, he's got a couple of books out there called You're Hired, a Graduate Career Handbook. At the moment, it's sort of like under £10, and you can opt to buy Kindle edition via Amazon. And it has Your Hired Job Hunting Online, a complete guide to sort of like job hunting, and it's very current and up to date. Published by Trotman, it's about £13 for those of you that want to invest in that. In the job search websites, this is just a very brief sort of like overview. I'm not going to go into great detail. S1 Jobs is a very familiar one with lots of mentees. I ask them to sort of jump on there, register and have a look out jobs. The really thing as well is that S1 Jobs, for those who don't want to sort of like spend any money for suggesting to mentees, want to have a look at career guides. These are all sort of up to date and written by people that are in that particular job area. The Universal Job Match is the sort of the government sort of like job search website. But in terms of a lot of the mentees that I've worked with over the years, I also use the public sector jobs portal, My Job Scotland, and goodmoves.org.uk. These are very good websites, and they basically are the job boards for the Scotland's local authorities, of which there are 32, and other sort of like third sector organisations. And this list is no means by exhaustive, and I just make the mentors aware of them not already.
And there are hundreds of them.
Absolutely, yes.
So I think what I always advise my mentees is that, well, there are many. Have a look at them and then decide on 2, 3, 4 would probably be the maximum that you want to do your regular job search on, because it's impossible to monitor them all, and And if they're similar, then the majority of the vacancies are that anyway. So it's really worth just choosing the few that are relevant and most unique as well, and focus on that rather than to do your job search on all of them all the time.
Yes. I would always say that it's a thing about familiarity and using them time in time again. You know, once you've registered with a couple of websites, you've got that framework. You've got that CV there, so it's really quite easy to jump in and make amendments as you go along and applying for whatever it may be. I'm so conscious of time now, folks, so I'm going to sort of quickly conclude.
I'll just jump in very quickly because I can see that Risa says she didn't catch the name of the author of the book.
Oh.
I think we'll just email it to everyone.
Yes. If you want, I can put it on the LinkedIn. I'll just put a link to sort of like Amazon. I can do that. Probably not today, but certainly at some point this week I'll jump onto the group and put it into the page for that. That's not a problem. So basically, we sort of began by looking at what makes a good CV. It's for me about the mentee taking ownership of the CV and able to recognise their own skills, being able to create and be confident in creating a CV around a particular vacancy and to the job description or specification that they've got. For me, that will make it stand out from the rest of the crowd, and I see that as very much as being part of my supporting role as a mentor. We then sort of moved on to talking about the different types of CV formats, and then we focused on the things that you must do in a CV and the things that you need to leave out. And for future reference, I also mentioned a few websites that we could sort of look at when I'm sort of coaching and developing clients. As Cassia mentioned, and these are by no means an exhaustive list, but certainly the familiar ones. Graduates certainly use prospects, and for mentors that are looking for something in the voluntary or sort of third sector, Good News is definitely a good sort of website to go onto. So, folks, that's it in a nutshell. That's me. I'm sort of done. I'm sort of going to sort of leave it open now to see if anyone has any questions for the next sort of like couple of minutes. So I'm sort of remain silent and just sort of speak when we see questions coming up. So please get anything that you want to ask. Please go ahead.
Maybe questions from, or in the meantime, while we wait for questions for our mentors, just one going back to what you said about personal profile, and then between the personal profile and cover letter, because again, in a way, your profile is your cover letter in a nutshell.
Yes. So absolutely, and it's about having that knack where you have that the linking sentence in your covering letter, where for example, just off the top of my head, I will see from my CV I have X, Y, and Z experience. Mm-hmm. So it's about being clever, and just that linking sentence will affect the manager directly to your CV and say, oh, he's used that system, he knows about this, she knows about that. So it's about being clever.
You wouldn't leave out a personal profile even if you're attaching a cover letter.
No, I would always have a personal profile, and it's really important because it's the first thing that the hiring manager is going to look at, your chance to shine.
Great. Just while we wait for some questions, please send the questions in. One thing that I'm thinking is how to avoid falling into the trap of kind of seeming fake or not quite personal enough, but avoid being overly informal. So do you have tips of that kind of middle ground where your personality shines through, but you're also not being kind of chatty in a CV, which you probably don't want?
Yes, I think it's about it's okay in the personal profile bit to sort of be be less formal, but trying not to overstep the boundary of sort of professional courtesy. I think that's quite important, that you can be less informal in that side. But as you mentioned about being formulaic, as a hire over the years, I've sifted through thousands of CVs, and you can tell the ones that have got like the good CVs, the ones that stand out, are the ones where people have taken time to personalise their personal profile, talk a lot about themselves, and perhaps where they want to be in the future. So, for example, if they see this job as a stepping stone into gain experience in, for example, project management, or for example, gaining more experience in a particular area. It's about being clever, and I think really important as well in the CVs is you will be sort of very formulaic when you're using sort of the active verbs, but always be active. Never use anything passive. This task was completed in time. Blah. That means nothing. And additionally, in sort of the additional information that like show your personality or show a different side to you. People are trying to get a well-rounded picture of you in your CV. You're able to do that in 2 pages and not many words. So you're trying to create a really good impression and sort of shout out to that hiring manager. Please put on your shortlist and worth interviewing. And about the time and tailoring your CV and using those hooks and those keywords, it's really important that you don't allow yourself, because in my experience of all the mentees that I've worked with, they all undersell themselves in the CVs. And
I think we have a question from Lisa. Do you suggest including quotes from employers or clients who like your work?
I think that's probably something that you would be more likely to include in something like your LinkedIn profile. I know that CVs are still the standard. That's the bread and butter of the hiring managers. We still expect to sort of see CVs, etc. With the LinkedIn profiles sort of up and running, there's no harm in including quotes from employers or sort of recommendations or accolades that you've got from people who liked your work. Definitely highlight that. There's no harm in putting that in. Some people have sort of mentioned to me, in CV, do they include their LinkedIn profile link? Yes, you can, absolutely. If you want somebody to have a look at your LinkedIn profile, that's absolutely fine. But you'll probably find that more generalist HR people will already be savvy to that, and really jump onto the LinkedIn page and see a little bit about the person that we're considering shortlisting for a job. I hope that's a question.
Right, I'm very aware of time, so I think we will be. I'll draw the webinar to close. If you have any other questions, do let us know. We'll email you a very short evaluation form shortly, so there will be a comment box. So if you have any other questions, that anything that we've not covered, please let us know in the evaluation form or drop us an email. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you found it useful, and a huge thank you to you, John, for putting together the content for the webinar and for delivering sharing your experience and knowledge with and our mentors. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.